walks into the observatory to find a miniature of the Chrysler building he made for her sometime later. They go on a date at the bar. They have dinner and share stories about their lives. She tells him that her father died when she was a teenager after the dinner. Jim takes Aurora to the airlock, and they get into the spacesuits. They go out for a spacewalk together. Jim finally has someone to share that magnificent experience with. Jim switches off the magnets on their boots, and they float together in space. They come back inside and immediately kiss, retreat to his cabin and sleep together. Soon after they start living like a couple. Aurora moves into his cabin and writes about her life on the ship. They jog together, eat together, sleep together. Jim explores the ship further, and he finds the hydroponics bay. He brings Aurora flowers one day. The ship passes by a red giant, and they go to the observatory to see it. It's Aurora's birthday, so later that night, they celebrated in one of the main restaurants on the ship. And then the bar. Jim goes to the washroom, and he prepares the ring he made for Aurora, while she stays in the bar chatting with Arthur. The android tells Aurora that Jim woke her up, intentionally, unaware that he was still to keep that a secret. Suddenly Jim comes back and she confronts him. In absolute disbelief, she runs away. Furious and panicked, Jim comes back to his cabin to find all her things gone. He runs into her in the cantina the next day, but the moment he speaks, she runs away. Aurora is desperate. One night she goes over to Jim's cabin, punching and kicking him, wanting to kill him. Talking to her over the comm, because she keeps avoiding him, Jim tries to apologize and explain his actions to her. He tells her he fell in love with her, but Aurora doesn't care. She can't forgive him for taking her life. One night as Jim is in his cabin, another malfunction happens. The ship faces a critical error, and the main command shuts down. Later he walks into the elevator and it malfunctions. Aurora walks into the main concourse, and he sees that Jim has planted a tracer. Then she goes to the cantina, where the food dispensary is also malfunctioning. Suddenly both of them hear the voice of the deck chief over the comms asking who planted the tree. They both run into the concourse and see Mancuso standing in front of Jim's tree. They introduce themselves and tell the chief about the situation. He doesn't understand how Tiga pods could fail. Cujo takes them to the bridge, and he discovers that there is something wrong with the ship, but the information on the systems has to be checked manually. When they leave the bridge, a robot almost falls on their heads, and the two of them tell Mancuso that malfunctions have been happening all over the ship. More frequently, he says that shouldn't happen, as he shows them how to collect the data. Mancuso checks on the pods. When Jim joins him, he's figured out what happened with Aurora's pod. The deck chief finds what Jim did to be terrible. Later he's at the bridge checking the collected data. When Aurora joins him, they talk about what happened with her pod, but he tells her that he can't do anything about it. Jim walks in with the unblessed broken robot. Mancuso feels the hibernation sickness, so he goes to rest, but as he walks out, he coughs out blood that night. Aurora can't sleep, so she goes for a swim. Suddenly there's gravity lost throughout the ship, and she starts drowning as the water from the pool moves with her. The gravity drive resets, and she barely makes it out alive. They both ran into each other going to find Mancuso. The three of them are back at the bridge, slowly discovering what has been going on with the ship. Mancuso figures out that something happened 2 years ago, taking out a major system. They need to find and fix what has caused the failure, because the entire ship is trying to pick up the slack. If they don't fix it, the entire vessel will be stranded. They go to find the problem, but Mancuso faints, so Jim and Aurora take him to the infirmary. He's dying, and he said there are no more treatments that can stop it or prolong the time he has left. Sometime later, the three of them meet in the observatory, and Mancuso gives Jim his ID bracelet, tells them to fix the ship, and immediately precious. Suddenly the lights change to an alarming red, and the ship starts shaking. Jim tells Aurora that he needs her help. Andy they run toward engineering, but there's another failure in the gravity drive. Andy immediately tally another one that afflicts Arthur, as well Jim deactivates him. They finally arrive in engineering. Andy start looking for the problem. They find it in the power plant, and as they open the hatch, Aurora gets sucked in. The asteroid has caused a breach in the hull. In that area Jim gets sucked into, but he holds on to the hatch as it keeps closing on him. Eventually he gets sucked in too, but they quickly manage to seal the breach. Instantly after fixing that problem, Jim realizes that there is more than one breach in the hull. The two of them follow the trajectory of the meteor, and they find that it has hit the reactor control computer. Jim thinks they can find replacement parts for it. They find the part and they change it, but the process of venting the reactor still fails. They do it manually but it fails again. Jim figures out that he needs to open the vent door from outside of the ship so they can cool the reactor down. Both of them go to the airlock, and as he's getting ready to go out, he gives Aurora Mancuso's bracelet, because he might not come back. She helps him with the suit, and as he walks into the airlock, she tells him to come back, because she can't leave on the ship without him. Aurora goes back to the reactor, where the temperature has hit critical heights. A board from the reactor propels into her arm. As Jim is getting closer to the vent from the outside, and he sees the door, the temperature rises in the reactor room. While he is trying to bypass the vent door to open it, he soon realizes that he'll have to manually hold the door open, so the reactor can vent, and he tells Aurora. She doesn't like the plan, but he goes ahead with it, and he tells her to vent the reactor. She doesn't want him to die, and they argue, but he tells her that they have to save the other people, and she vents the reactor. The process is successful, but the fumes from the reactor push Jim away, and he breaks his tether. The pressure in his suit is dropping too. He tells Aurora what happened, and she moves as fast as she can to get to another suit, and bring him in. He apologizes to her again. She puts on a suit and flies out to get him, but her tether is too short. She's pulled back but suddenly grabs onto his tether and manages to pull him in. Aurora drags Jim into the infirmary, only to find out that he's already dead. She uses Mancuso's bracelet to override the medical protocols, and to resuscitate him. The medical pod does the work automatically, and he revives Jim. Aurora forgives him. Later Aurora fixes Arthur, and they give Mancuso a proper space burial. Jim takes her to the infirmary, and he tells her that he's found a way to use the medical pod as a hibernation one. He tells her to get inside the pod, and he ride out the rest of the journey in her. But as is later revealed, she declines and he decides to stay with him. Awake on the ship, Jim finally proposes to her,